We will continue in this lesson series on the history of physiology, focusing on the question, why do we breathe? We have ended last lesson with the introduction of William Harvey, who's going to make major revisions in Galen's understanding of the human body. In particular, Harvey gathered direct evidence that there are no holes in the septum, so blood cannot go from the right ventricle to the left in the adult heart, and that sort of forced Harvey to think that perhaps the blood was pumped by the right ventricle through the lungs, and it was blood returning to the heart on the left side, not air. So that suggested a kind of a circuit, that blood is moving from the heart to the lungs back to the heart. Now, if that's the case, then it means there must be some physical connection between the blood vessels taking blood to the lungs and those taking blood back from the lungs to the heart. But of course, like Galen, Harvey could not see such a connection here in the lungs nor anywhere else in the body. You'll recall Galen thought there were just these two separate blood systems, the blood in the veins and the blood in the arteries, and he did not think those two were connected, obviously because he could not see such connections. Right, so but Harvey is going to investigate the possibility that they really are connected, even if we couldn't see them at that time, if you can't see the connection with the naked eye. Now, how's he going to do this? He's going to get clever and do an experiment. If arteries and veins were really connected, well then what should happen when we drain the arteries of blood? So he's going to cut the arteries of an animal and drain its blood. Of course, the animal will perish in this procedure, but then he's going to check the veins to see if there's still blood in the veins. If in fact the veins and the arteries are connected, we might predict then that the veins would be empty, because the blood in the veins will also be drained out, the artery and the vein systems being connected. So if arteries and veins are physically connected and we drain the arteries of blood and check the veins for blood, then the veins should be empty as well. The result, same as predicted. So our interpretation, the hypothesis, is supported. So Harvey's gathering evidence that arteries and veins are connected, even if the connection is too small to be seen with the naked eye. Here we see an exhibit called the Body Worlds exhibit. This is a human being who donated their body to science, to this museum. The body has been prepared in a special way. All the other tissues of the body have been removed, just leaving the blood vessels. You can see every part of our body is serviced by blood vessels. Of course, the question for Harvey at the time was whether the arteries and veins were physically connected. And here's another consideration that Harvey entertained. Harvey was aware of the existence of valves in the veins. This is one of the famous diagrams in his book. In this illustration, he's showing how we can demonstrate the existence of valves in the veins. Now, what are these valves? Well, here's a picture of two veins that are merging to a larger vein here. Inside the veins, but not the arteries, are little flaps of tissue that function as one-way valves. Blood can move in one direction only, and if the blood attempts to move in the opposite direction, the little flaps of tissue close up, and it prevents the backflow of blood. Now, Harvey noticed an interesting pattern in the orientation of these valves. He found that the valves were always oriented in such a way as to keep the blood moving to the heart from whatever part of the body you're talking about. So if you're talking about the lower body, like the legs, the valves were oriented in such a way that blood kept moving upwards towards the heart. If you're talking about the veins in the neck, blood has to move downward to get to the heart, and the valves will accommodate that motion. So the valves were oriented in such a way that it kept blood in the veins moving toward the heart. The heart was the key destination for the veins. If we take a closer look at the legs, for example, we'll see that lots of the veins are surrounded by muscle tissue, and whenever we contract our muscles just by walking around, it has the effect of squeezing the veins and pushing the blood up against the force of gravity, and that's what you have to do to get blood from your legs up to the heart, because the heart is above the legs. And so this is how muscles then can improve the circulation of the blood by helping the blood move along through the veins back to the heart. By contrast, in the neck, you don't have that problem of fighting gravity, but nevertheless the valves are still oriented to keep the blood moving to the heart. So when we're laying down, for example, and the blood is not moving with gravity, the valves will ensure that the blood is making its way back to the heart from the head region. So the orientation of valves in the veins suggested a kind of circuit for the movement of blood. Arteries carried blood from the heart to a body part, and veins carried the blood back to the heart. Harvey was growing more confident that arteries and veins were connected, thus completing a circuit. So this would be two circuits then, heart to lungs to heart, and heart to body to heart. So let's summarize Harvey's thinking so far. The heart is a pump, and the adult septum does not allow blood to flow from the right to the left ventricle. Animals with lungs have two ventricles. The right ventricle pumps blood to the lungs, and blood returns to the left side of the heart. The left ventricle pumps blood to the body, and the blood would return to the right side of the heart. Valves in the veins keep blood moving to the heart, so arteries must be taking blood away from the heart, and the veins and the arteries are likely connected because draining blood from the arteries leaves the veins empty as well. You can see this thinking is backed up by observations and experiments. So here we see Harvey and Galen side by side, major revisions to get to Harvey's view of the body. We call this the circulatory system. It's a dual circulation system, heart to lungs to heart, heart to body to heart. There are no holes in the septum, thus keeping the blood separated in the heart. That will, of course, now make sense. We don't want the blood with oxygen to be mixed with blood without oxygen. The whole point of the circuit through the lungs is going to be to pick up oxygen, so we keep those blood supplies separate with that septum there in the ventricles. And we have these physical connections between the arteries and the veins, and even though Harvey couldn't see them, it turns out just a few years later, scientists with microscopes observed capillaries, the physical connections between arteries and veins. Now, Harvey was not done. In the next lesson, we'll see one more kind of observation and calculation that argued for the circulation of the blood.